Greetings one and all, Super Thursdays, here in the Holy Land, in the Holy Apple, in the Holy Hilltop, Tal Binyamin. We are on the 6th day of Adar, 5781, the countdown, 8 days left till the joyous holiday of Purim. Keeping in the spirit of joyous, before we get to our class, there was a groom. He just had been married for about 4 months, and he came to the head of the yeshiva, and he spoke to the headmaster of the yeshiva, and he said, "Rabbi, can you tell me what hand do I put my tefillin on?" Now, the rabbi looks at the groom and he knows he's about 23, 24 years old. That means he's been putting on tefillin for the last 11 years. And why did this question wait for 11 years? So the rabbi says, "I don't understand the question. You're 24 years old. Where were you all these years?" He says, "No, I just got married 3-4 months ago, and my wife tells me that I have 2 left hands, so I'm not sure exactly which hand to put on the tefillin." Okay, with that said, we are starting two-part class. As we go along, I'll think about if we're going to do the second part this year or wait till next year. See how it goes, see how long the first part. Okay, if you're here, if you're listening, wherever you are in the world, you must have some kind of merit of your grandparents or your parents or yourself, because we're really going to tear the roof off the sucker. Today's title, Shocking Revelation. Why are we celebrating Purim on the wrong day? Shocking Revelation. Why are we celebrating Purim on the wrong day? Okay, let's get a history timeline. We're talking about the year 3404, that's Jewish talk. And it was the month of Nisan. Haman threw a lot, and it was decided that in 11 months from when the lot was tossed, the Jewish people would be exterminated in the month of Adar on the 13th day, the year 3405. Once again, the lot was tossed in the year 3404 in the month of Nisan, the first month of the year. It fell on the 12th month of the year, which is Adar, 11 months later. Okay, that's our timetable. The story of Purim took place 2,376 years ago, 2376. Okay, so 11 months pass, and comes the 13th of Adar. This was the day that was decided by a throwing of a lot, by the jackpot of Haman to destroy the Jewish people. It didn't turn out that way. It turned out v'nafochu, exactly the opposite. You know how many people put their money on the Kansas City Chiefs, and then TB12 came and just sent them all flying. So that's the way it happened also with Haman. He came on the 13th day, the Jewish people stood up, the Jewish people fought, and killed tens of thousands of Jewish enemies in a span of 2 days. So, we have, the Talmud tells us in Tractate Megillah, second page, first side. It tells us that the 13th day was a day that the Jewish people assembled together. Rashi adds, the major miracle of the story of Purim occurred on this day, the 13th day of Purim. The majority of the miracle, the turning around the tables, the Jewish people standing up, defeating their enemies. Most of it, the majority, overwhelming majority of the miracle happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar. Well, that's very interesting. According to the Gemara, according to the Rashi and others, question arises, and many ask, what is going on here? We celebrate Purim either on the 14th day, if you live in open communities, cities, and if you live in walled cities, Jerusalem, Tiberias, and other places, then you would celebrate on the 15th. But nobody's celebrating Purim on the 13th day. How did we get duped? Why don't we celebrate Purim on the 13th day? That is when the Jewish people were victorious in battle. That is when the tables were turned. Our enemies fell. We were victorious. This question is asked by two great scholars. It's asked by many, but the ones that I will concentrate on today are, number one, is Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz. Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz lived approximately 450 years ago, and you all know him. Well, you might say, well, I never heard of him. Well, you might never heard of him, but this was his famous song, which you sing every Friday night. And if you don't sing it every Friday night, you better start singing it on Friday nights. You know, Lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. No extra charge for that musical interlude. Okay, so Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz, the author of a dozen books, he asked this question: what in the world are we doing? How do we make this mistake of celebrating on the 14th? Purim should be one day earlier, on the 13th day of Adar. And listen to his answer. His answer is the following. He bases it on the Talmud, Megillah, page 10, side B. It says that on the night of the 21st of Nisan, the 7th day of Passover, it says that the Egyptians and the Jewish people did not come close to one another. V'lo karav zeh el zeh kol halayla. Our sages in the Talmud tell us that there's something deeper that's happening here, besides Egyptians and Jews being separated. What's going on here? The angels of heavens requested from God to sing praises to God. They wanted to sing out to God over the victory, the defeat of the Egyptians. God in turn responded, my creations are drowning, and you want to sing a song? And also, so we see here that when the angels wanted to sing at the downfall of the Egyptians, God said, time out, no singing. Why? Because the Egyptians are drowning. This is not time for singing. Okay. Rav Shlomo Elkabetz also brings down a verse that was in the book of Mishlei by King Solomon. It says that when your enemy falls, do not rejoice. Okay, so there we have 2 strikes. And therefore, concludes Rabbi Elkabetz, that the reason why, even though the miracle of Purim took place on the 13th, we do not celebrate the 13th because we are not, it should not be understood that we are celebrating the downfall of our enemies, something that we do not do. That's how we are celebrating the saving of the Jewish people. The redemption of the Jewish people, yes. So therefore we differentiate. The celebration takes place on the 14th. We are celebrating the liberation of the Jewish people. 13th is no celebration because of the fact that was when our enemies in Persia 2,376 years ago when they lost, when they were destroyed. Now, another more contemporary giant, Torah giant, Rabbi Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, famous for his commentary on the Torah called Meshech Chochmah, famous for his commentary on Maimonides or Sameach. Believe it or not, Rabbi Meir Simcha wrote his unbelievable commentary on the Torah at the age of, drumroll, 17. It's an unbelievable, lofty, beautiful commentary on the Torah. Age of 17, amazing. Rav Meir Simcha passed away in the year 1926. Tremendous Torah scholar. He writes the same idea as Rav Shlomo Elkabetz, just a difference of 300 odd years that separated them. No one, Rabbi Meir Simcha does not quote Rav Shlomo Elkabetz. He asked the question on his own initiative, and they both have the same answer. Now, let's make it clear and straight as day. Of course, myself, I am not at the heels of any of these two Torah scholars. However, when we learn Torah, we have to go to the sources and let the sources speak for themselves. It's not any disrespect. I have, and I'm sure all our listeners have, the utmost respect for Torah giants. How much more so for Rav Shlomo Elkabetz and also Rav Meir Simcha, the Meshech Chochmah. Tremendous respect. What we will be discussing today are other Torah giants that refute this type of understanding why we do not celebrate on the 13th. So we'll, with no further ado, let's let their words speak for themselves. The first class that we have, with God's help, will be concentrating on answering this question. The question asked and answered by Rabbi Meir Simcha and Rav Shlomo Elkabetz, and our answer will be from within. The answer will be that the holiday of Purim itself is a contradiction, a tremendous contradiction to this outlook presented by these two great Torah giants within the holiday of Purim. I'm not going outside of Purim. Within what a Jew does during the 24-hour day of Purim, I'm just going to concentrate on that. Okay, so let's hit it. In a parenthesis, some years ago, God assisted me tremendously. I was able to put out a 6 or 7 part class, have not finished it yet, on do Jews celebrate at the defeat of our enemies, at the downfall of our enemies. Folks, for those that are interested in following up on the 6 or 7 part series on rejoicing in the downfall of our enemies, there's a link above, and just click on it and you could get those, you could download those classes. So our first source, we have six rebuttals here. Number 1, it says in the Talmud Megillah, page 16, side A, tells the story that the king Achashverosh was having trouble sleeping. We're in the middle month of Nisan at this time, and all of a sudden he remembers that he was saved by Mordechai, and nobody had You know, they say there's a joke about, of course, Gentile Persians, that they're very stingy. Of course, they're not talking about Jewish Persians, because I'm sure they're not, but there are many, many good jokes about the stinginess of Gentile Persians. Okay, so somehow the king of Persia, he forgot, you know, to reward Mordechai for saving his life. Okay, and all of a sudden he remembers, once again, we're in the middle of Nisan. The Jewish people are in the midst of a 3-day fast. Bless you. In a 3-day fast. And all of a sudden, so the king of Persia, Hashverosh, has decided to reward Mordechai by sending him down the street in a celebration, for Mordechai in the streets. And who happens to walk in at that same moment that he's about to think of a great idea, what to do with, how to reward exactly Mordechai? Like, do you take the Lombardi trophy at the parade and throw it from boat to boat? Is that how we're going to reward Mordechai? How is it going to run? Okay. So Haman walks in, and Achshverosh said, "Wow, it's good you came, Haman. And I want to ask you a question. How should we reward a person that has saved the life of the king and has done tremendous deeds for the king?" And of course, Haman thinks that it's himself that's being spoken about. And he tells, give a great parade, put him on a horse, give him the king's wardrobe, and send him down the streets. And Achashverosh, he says, "I'm going to go for it." This was like before Nike. This was like, go for it. And he says, "Okay, Haman, whatever you said to do it to Mordechai." Oh, like it's like a slap in the face. Mordechai, I thought it was talking about me. Anyways, now in those familiar with horses, it's not easy to get on top of a horse. Try it. It's like not easy to get on a horse. How do you get up there? It's pretty high up. So Mordechai says, "Listen, I'm on a 3-day fast. I don't have a lot of strength. Put yourself, huddle over yourself and go down on the floor, and I'll use you as a stepping, like a step to get up to the horse." So Haman goes down to the floor, and he, bends over, and Mordechai is going to step on his back in order to get up to the horse. So instead of getting up to the horse, Mordechai just happens to pull out one of these Bruce Lee. You can't see here because I'm blocked here. One of these Bruce Lee karate kicks, boom, right in the stomach of Haman. Another one bites the dust. Yes, gotta keep in the spirit of Purim here. Okay, so can you imagine that? This is a humiliation. This is a humiliation here of Haman. So Haman looks. Now don't forget, Haman was no fool. Haman was no ignoramus. Haman worked for Mordechai for many years in his house. Haman knew the date that Moses died. He knew that on the 7th day of Adar, tomorrow, in our time, this year, he knew when he died. Now, folks, I want you to go down to Tel Aviv, in wherever you want to go on Dizengoff Street, Ben Yehuda Street, and I want you to ask people in Tel Aviv, Jews, I want you to please tell me, what day did Moses pass away? What day did Moses pass away? Ask that question. How many people are going to know the answer? But let me tell you, Haman knew the answer. And he also knew verses of the Torah. Amazing. Because he worked for many years with Mordechai in Mordechai's house. So, like sometimes when you have to desecrate, you need some Gentile to desecrate Sabbath. Some of them have been around so long before you even open up your mouth, they know what to do. I mean, they know the laws, like they know a lot of the laws. Pretty amazing. So, Haman turns to Mordechai after he gets up. He was just kicked in the stomach. And he says, doesn't it say in your Torah that you shall not celebrate and be happy in the downfall of your enemies? And I see Mordechai, you've humiliated me. You're celebrating my downfall. Oh, Mordechai says, you know what? That's talking about when a Jew falls. When a Jew falls, you should not rejoice. Let's say you have a personal enemy, a person you don't like, a neighbor you don't like, a relative you cannot stand, and they pass away or they lose all their money. Do not celebrate. It's a fellow Jew. That was the answer of Mordechai. We see clearly from this Talmud passage, 16a, very clearly, that this is a tremendous refute for the two tremendous scholars that we mentioned at the beginning. Very clear that when it comes to the downfall of the nations, a Jew, yes, does celebrate the downfall of our enemies. Okay, so we have a few sources that we will quickly take a look at. Source number one is the famous book, the Sefer Hasidim. The Sefer Hasidim in two paragraphs. Paragraph 187 and paragraph 607. The Sefer Hasidim, Rav Yehuda Hasid comes along, listen to what he says. What Mordechai said, that when we do celebrate at the downfall of our enemies, which are non-Jews, wicked non-Jews, it's not exact. Why? Because if there are certain wicked Jews, not every Jew who is wicked falls into the category, but if we have a wicked Jew, then we are also commanded to celebrate their downfall. And he gives a few examples. Number one, he says, if any Jew is upset or is mourning, feels bad about the pain that was given to a wicked person, a cruel wicked person, that Jew who feels sorry for the other Jew who's a wicked Jew, who's a cruel Jew to others, he will be punished. The Jew that feels sorry for him, he is going to be punished. Why? Because King Solomon taught us that when the wicked fall, rejoice. And King Solomon did not make a differentiation between a Jew and a non-Jew. And he goes on. Even though it says in the Torah that you should not rejoice in the downfall of your enemy, and we'll assume that we're talking about a Jewish enemy, we're talking about a neighbor we despise, a friend, a family member we despise, we hate. But if we have a wicked person who causes the Jewish people to sin, brings Jews to fall in sin, incites Jews to sin, or a Jew that causes damage to the Jewish people by their actions, such a person, we say, when they fall, when such a Jew falls, we rejoice. To such a person, when they fall, a Jew, we say another verse in Psalms, that a righteous person will be happy when he sees God, when he sees vengeance against the wicked. So folks, this is like a grand slam here. The Sefer Hasidim says what the Talmud says. Mordechai made a differentiation between Jews, the fall of a Jew we don't celebrate, and the fall of our enemies, amongst the nations we do celebrate, it's not so simple. Because there are even Jews that we celebrate their downfall. How much more so? A holiday, Purim, which we celebrate the downfall of our enemies. That's number one. Okay. Number two. In the book Zichron Sofrim, he asks a question. If you've ever been in a synagogue during the time where they read the Megillah, you'll see a lot of Jews, you can't see because I'm blocked here, but stamping their feet. Stamp their feet. Why is that? Why are people stamping their feet? I can understand a person's whistling. I can understand a person with one of those groggers, you know. I got it. But what in the world is a person, you know, stamping their feet? What is the... I've been at basketball games or hockey games where people, you know, stamp their feet. But what's going on? Now, the Zichron Sofrim, he brings down an amazing reason why. You know why we do that? Because we want to commemorate the foot, the kick, the karate kick that Mordechai did against Haman. So therefore, every time we say Haman's name, how many times do we say his name? Okay, this is a secret, don't let it out. 54. 54 times, okay? Very easy to remember. Dan is to judge in Hebrew. So if you remember Dan, the numerical value of Dan is 54. That's how many times Haman's name is said during the reading of the Megillah. Okay, so therefore, in order to commemorate that big kick, that kick of humiliation, the kick of rejoicing in the downfall of our enemies that Mordechai kicked out, that is why we stamp our feet, remembering and commemorating it. Remember what, we're not hiding it, we're not embarrassed of it. Exactly the opposite, we're showing it off. The Chida, Chaim Yosef David Azulai writes in his book called Kuntris Acharon, under the letter A, Aleph. It's paragraph 688. The Chida writes, what is going on? If you ever have been in a synagogue or where they read or a yeshiva, you cannot believe what's going down. I mean, people are yelling, people are screaming, people are stamping their feet, there's fireworks going off, it's like, wow, what's going on? Chida says an amazing idea. You know what the message is? The message is, on purpose, the celebration is so boisterous and so happy. Why? Because it is a message. In Arabic we say dir ballak, which means better be careful, watch out. You probably never thought you would learn a little bit of Arabic in my classes here. Okay, you got it. No extra charge for the lesson in Arabic. So we say to the Gentiles of the world, our enemies, those that want to destroy the Jewish people, we tell them, look what happened. We make this boisterous party and we publicize our victory, telling the evil nations of the world, be careful. If you want to come after us, this nation also wanted to come after us and destroy us and annihilate us. Look at the celebration that it has turned into. Look at the party atmosphere that has happened as we celebrate the downfall of our enemies. Amazing Chida. This is a warning shot to the evil nations of the world, do not start up with Jews. Moving right along, the Maharal of Prague writes on this Talmud, Megillah 16a, which we quoted, about this exchange between Mordechai and Haman and the kick, that the blow that Haman suffered. And the Maharal tells us that when does a person rejoice? A person rejoices when they are in a complete or wholesome state. That is when a person rejoices. So, the Maharal goes on and says, when a Jewish enemy of mine, somebody that might not be a Jewish enemy, but he might be somebody that we have very different personalities, I really can't stand the person, gets on my nerves. I keep my distance. When such a person falls or dies, we do not rejoice. Why? Because the fall of one Jew, because we are connected, all Jews are connected to one another, it's as if we have fallen. If another Jew has taken a loss, or in a billion different types of ways that a person could take a loss, why should I celebrate? The Jewish people are no longer complete. If one Jew is suffering, he's on the down and out, then it's as if all the Jewish people are down and out. So there's no reason to celebrate. Okay, I couldn't stand it, I hated his guts. Doesn't matter. We are connected, as if a part of me has been taken away. However, the Maharal concludes, this is because all Jews are brothers and sisters. I know you might think that only blacks are brothers because, hey bro, yo bro, what's going on bro? It's all bro. Right, but they stole that also from the Jewish people because all Jews are brothers and sisters. So, however, the Maharal concludes, this is not so when a Gentile, an evil Gentile, or a nation of evil Gentiles fall. Why? Because their falling, listen to the words, their falling represents completeness and wholesomeness for the Jewish people and the Jewish nation. Did you hear those words? When the nations of the world, the evil ones, or evil individuals fall, take a loss, this is a tremendous sanctification of God's name. When the evil are on top, this is a desecration. God's name is not whole. It's a vacuum. That's what the word chilul, it's a vacuum, emptiness. However, when our enemies, when God punishes our enemies and they fall, this is a tremendous sanctification of God's name and also the Jewish people. This brings the Jewish people to a complete, wholesome level. Last but not least, okay, I see that one we took care of. Okay, so I think we're good. One more. I knew we had one more. Okay, in the book Beit Aaron v'Yisrael, on page 143, the rabbi who composed the book, came up to the leading sage of our generation, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky of Bnei Brak, and he said to Rav Chaim Kanievsky, I don't understand. We have this Talmud which talks about Mordechai rejoicing over the downfall of Haman. On the other hand, we have brought down by Shibulei Aleket, who lived 850 years ago. Shibulei Aleket brings down a midrash called Harninu, which is not in our hands. We do not have it for many hundreds and hundreds of years. And it says there that the reason why we do not say a complete Hallel on the 7th day of Passover is because of the fact that the Egyptians drowned, and the Jews do not celebrate at the downfall of their enemies. So I don't understand Rabbi Kanievsky. On one hand, we have a Talmud. We have the Talmud that tells us black and white that Mordechai is celebrating at the downfall of the enemies of the Jewish people. On the other hand, we have this book, a famous book called Shibulei Aleket, written 850 years ago. Okay, we're talking about a Rishon. And he quotes a midrash which is not in our hands, that the reason why we do not celebrate, we do not sing a complete Hallel on the 7th day of Passover when the Egyptians drowned is because of the fact that they drowned, and we do not celebrate the downfall of our enemies. I don't understand. So Rav Kanievsky, this is his answer. He says the following: it's clear to me that our Gemara is against, disputes what is written in the Midrash of Harninu. That's clear to me. Number two, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky said, we also do not have it in our possession. It's not in our hands, this Midrash. So therefore, we don't know who wrote it. We don't know exactly where it came from. Sometimes books have two authors, some later on additions. We cannot bring any proof from this Midrash Harninu because it's not in our hands. We don't know who wrote it. Shibulei Aleket did bring it down 850 years ago, that's true. But we don't know its source. So folks, in plain language, when you have a Gemara, a Talmud, and you have a Midrash which we do not know who authored it, and we do not have it in our possession to check out what was written. Many times there are mistakes that whoever was copying the book made a mistake or two. There are additions, things not from the original, people stuck in. No! Very clear. Putting it on the Richter scale, pardon the pun, very clear that the Talmud, black and white, which tells us that we do celebrate the downfall of the wicked, and we do celebrate Purim, you cannot put him on the same scale. Very clear. Okay, next. There, in the time of the book of Esther, the scroll of Esther, there was called a party of Esther. The party of Esther took place in the middle of the month of Nisan. Nisan is the month of Passover. Passover is right in the smack in the middle of the month, 15th of the month. Okay, and there was a festive meal for 2 days. It's called the festive meal of Esther, which Haman was invited twice for 2 days. Now, it is brought down in the Code of Jewish Law, Orach Chaim 690, at the beginning. It is brought down by such scholars such as the Shlah HaKadosh. It is brought down by the Magen Avraham, the Jewish law expert, the Magen Avraham. It is brought down by the book Chok Yaakov. It is brought down in many, many other Jewish law books. 690. And it tells us that there is a special festive meal that one should have on the 16th day of Nisan, which is the second day of Passover. And if you're having a festive meal anyways because of Passover, that does not exempt you. You must add a delicacy to your meal. Why is that? Because of the fact that Haman was hanged on the 16th day of Nisan. So therefore, for the last thousands of years, 2376, Jews have added or to their festive meals a delicacy, or they have a festive meal. Remembering what? Remembering the hanging of Haman. Now when you remember the hanging, you have to understand, like coming from Los Angeles, we had like a sign like this. It was like, hang loose. But Haman was not hanging loose because he was up there for months. He was up there hanging. He wasn't hanging loose. He was hanging tight. So, the Jewish people, brought down in Jewish law about this custom of the 16th day of Nisan, the second day of Passover, to add something special to your meal, or if you're not having anything special, then make a festive meal, remembering the downfall of our enemies. Third proof. As we spoke about a little bit before, you're invited to, I don't know about this year with the virus, but you're invited to synagogues or to Jewish schools, and you will see when Haman's name or his son's names are said in prayer, in the reading of the scroll, you will see a commotion. You will see mayhem. You might have to bring, I know wherever I sit, usually people that sit next to me in yeshiva, they bring earplugs because they know they're in for a few surprises by me. I'm bringing some of my wife's pans and pots and a metal spoon to make noise. So you don't want to sit next to me when we're reading the scrolls of Esther. Okay, when was this custom first mentioned? This custom was mentioned over 800 years ago. That's a long time. In the book called Hamanhig. This is a Rishon, early scholar, over 800 years ago. He lived over 800 years ago. And he writes that this is the proper way, fashion for a Jew to hear the Megillah. Of course, later on, it's brought down in hundreds of Jewish law experts telling us that this is the custom. For example, the Ramah brings it down in his commentary on the Code of Jewish Law. Paragraph 619, 17, 690 and 17. Chapter 690, paragraph 17. Got it. Okay. Now, what in the world is going on in this celebration? This happened 2376 years ago. What is going down? Why is everybody celebrating the downfall of these wicked people? What is going on here? Folks, put on a seatbelt because we don't have any insurance. But this is the reason, this year, now you'll know what happens at that time when Haman's name is read and we pull out all our ammo. What happens at that moment? Okay, our first source. Okay, first source is a Jewish law book written by the famous author Rabbi Chaim Falaji. He has a book, it's called Ruach Chaim, and it's a commentary on Jewish law. He writes there in chapter 696, paragraph 9, tells us an amazing thing. I'm sure no one has ever heard this. Every time, every year, when Haman's name is read 54 times, we said, God revives Haman and the wicked that wanted to annihilate the Jewish people, and they are once again punished. That is an amazing thing. Think about it. How can you punish? Let's say 75 years ago in Germany. How do you punish a Nazi, may their memories be erased? How do you punish them for killing 100 people? I know that in the States Trump pardoned some Jews that had received 840-something years in prison for stealing, $200 million, different shenanigans that they did. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol neh b'dvaro. Okay, but it's a joke. How do you really, we're talking about God, let's get godly. How do you punish one Nazi soldier who was responsible for the killing of 100 Jews, 200, 1,000? So therefore, we have many cases in the Torah, in our sources, starting from creation, where God brings back, so to speak. Sometimes it's reincarnation, so they could be punished again and again. Sometimes God revives a person from hell, and they're back to their old selves, and they once again suffer a punishment, because it ain't over till God sings. And a person is punished exactly, is meted out exactly what he or she deserves, and not 1 gram less. So that's Rav Chaim Falaji, amazing. If you think it's just Rabbi Chaim Falaji, no. We go on to a story about Rabbi Yudah HaChassid. This is brought down in the gates of Jewish law, page 336. He brings it down. This was found in a written manuscript, and it was published in a book called Torah and Life, Torah ve'Chaim, on page 2. So there are 2 sources here. And here's the following story. Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, we mentioned his book before, Sefer Chassidim. He commented that the reason why we make noise when the name of Haman is red, because every year he is pulled out of hell, and he and his family and those that supported him are once again punished. Now Rabbi Yudah Hasid brings down from the book Midrash Eliyahu, page 81, side B. Once again, the same kind of concept, that every single year our noise, so to speak, is the punishment. Imagine, I mean, that's like a serious punishment. Think about all the noise, people come out there, their ears are torched. That's like a serious punishment that's going on in the heavens, or actually in the hells. And last but not least, an amazing source. Listen to this one. Okay, this is brought in the book Torah Vadat on page 371. This is amazing. The Torah Vadat book brings down two sources why we make noise. Listen to this. He brings down the commentary of Maimonides on the Scrolls of Esther, chapter 8, verse 1, that when Haman was brought out to be hanged on the 16th day of Nisan, all of the Jews and all of the priests, the Kohanim, pulled out their trumpets and, like Louis Armstrong, celebrated with the trumpets. Amazing. This idea is even earlier than Maimonides. It is brought down in the Targum on the Scrolls of Esther, chapter 8, verse 1. Even further, we have the Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra writes in his commentary to Numbers, chapter 10, verse 10. He writes there, it says that the Jewish people, on the day of joy, they shall pull out their trumpets and blow their horns. What does it mean, the day of rejoicing? What are we rejoicing about? So Ibn Ezra comes and he just hits it out of the stadium. When you are victorious over your enemies, you shall establish a day of joy like the holiday of Purim. I mean, you can't get more black and white than this unbelievable Ibn Ezra. That's how Jews celebrate and rejoice at the downfall of our enemies. He brings it in a biblical source. This is a biblical source that the Ibn Ezra is quoting. Next. Proof number 4. So far, just recapping. Number 1, we had the kick, the karate kick of Mordechai in the stomach of Haman in the Talmud. Number 2, we spoke about the second day of Passover, where we have a special meal, or an addition of a delicacy to celebrate the hanging of Haman and his sons. That was number 2. Number 3, we spoke about the making noise when it comes time to the 54 mentions of Haman's name. Next, there is a custom to eat. In Yiddish, they call them Hammentaschens. There's these little triangle suckers. Tastes pretty good. In Hebrew, they are called Oznei Haman. In English, they are called the ears of Haman. Now, that sounds a little bit of rejoicing at the downfall of our enemies. Okay, so a little bit of a history lesson here, no extra charge. The history first. We'll go back real far. In the Midrash Esther, it is written that when Haman was brought to perform this ceremony with Mordechai, he thought he was going to be glorified in this ceremony that he thought up of, and in turn now he has to do it to Mordechai. Anyways, it says there in the Midrash that his ears he was hunched over, and also his ears were kind of hunched over. So from here, many of our sources say this is the custom of the eating of the ears, so to speak, the ears of Haman. So it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years to the source of the Midrash Esther. Okay, and there's another explanation that's brought down, that there was an ancient custom that a person that was hanged, before they would hang him, they would first take off their ears. So in order to celebrate the hanging of Haman and his sons, we have a pastry called the ears of Haman. Okay, now we go into the more modern day history of this delicacy, this pastry. And here's how we start. It was the year 1616. So we're talking about 404 years ago. We're in Germany. And we're in Frankfurt, Germany. And there was a gigantic Jewish community that lived in the year 1616 in that community. Until one day, an evil person named Winsett Padamilich. Now this Winsett Padamilich happened to be a baker. That was his occupation. He was a baker. And he organized and incited many of the Frankfurt citizens against the Jewish people. And in order for the Tsar, or the leader of Frankfurt, who, in order for him to receive power, he needed to form a coalition. And fortunately or unfortunately for him, the only way that the leader of Frankfurt, who was voted in, could make a coalition was to go with the party of this Winsett fellow. And one of his demands, may his name be erased, was the expulsion of the Jewish community of Frankfurt, Germany. And that's what happened. The Jews were not allowed to take any of their belongings, possessions. They were forced expulsion from Frankfurt, Germany. The Jews wandered for over 2 years, until finally the tables turned around, and it was decided by a tribunal trial that the wicked Winsett Padamilich would be, him and his cohorts, would be hanged in Midtown, center of the city. The date was, believe it or not, the 20th day of Adar, 6 days after the Jewish holiday of Purim. the Jewish people, in order to celebrate the hanging of Winset, may his memory be erased, they decided, before he was hanged, his ears were cut off, Winset. And from that time, we're talking about 405 years ago. From that time on, came the concept of the ears of Haman. This Haman was not the Haman of 2376 years ago. This was a modern day Haman, 406 years ago. And that is our quote-unquote modern day source of the ears of Haman coming out of Frankfurt, Germany. Not only that, the Jews of Germany that were called back more than 2 years after wandering, they composed a very upbeat song. It was a Kaddish, what we say on a dead person. They composed their own type of style of Kaddish, a mourner's prayer for the mourning, quote unquote, over the death of this wicked person. And it was a very upbeat tune. So, before we end this first part, we'll just tell you a little bit more. In Germany, the Germans enjoyed a delicacy, a pastry that was called Manntouch. Manntouch. Manntouch was a pocket of poppy seed. And if you listen to the word Manntouch, Man is the same letters as Haman. So later on, some hundreds of years ago, the Jews turned the Manntouch pastry of the Germans into the Haman-tash. But don't worry about that, because we also have sources for the Haman-tash. Tash in Hebrew means became weakened. When the tables turned on Haman, as we said, he became hunchback. His ears also became ill and sick. So his strength, our sages tells us that the Hamantash is really called that because of the fact that the air was taken out of the wicked Haman. The air was taken out. So that's why it's called the Hamantash. His strength was weakened. Don't forget, stay tuned with us. God willing, next week we have part 2.